Hey everyone, welcome back to our YouTube channel. Today we have got an exciting project for you. We'll create a simple clock animation using HTML and CSS. So let's get started. Here we have a div element with a class attribute set to clock. Next we have an another list element with an ID attribute set to clock. Here we have list item within the unordered list. Each list item contains a span element with the numbers 1 to 12. Next we have a div element with a class attribute set to center. Now let's add CSS. Here we have a universal selector. Margin and the padding is set to 0. Box sizing is set to border box. Now let's style the body element. Here background color is set to dark blue color. Now let's style the clock element. Position is set to absolute. Top and left is set to 50%. Transform is set to translate -50%. Width and height is set to 300 pixel. Border is set to 15 pixels solid. Light purple color. Border radius is set to 50%. And the background is set to white. Here we use box shadow. So that it adds a shadow effect to the clock. The first box shadow creates a shadow on the outer edge. The second box shadow creates a slight insert shadow. Now let's add a shadow element. Here the content is set to an empty string. Position is set to absolute. Top is set to calc 50% -3 pixel. Left is set to 50%. Width is set to 35%. And the height is set to 6 pixel. This property position and style a horizontal line before the clock. Background is set to dark grey color. Border radius is set to 3 pixels so that it adds a rounded corner of the hour end. Animation is set to animate 4-second linear infinite. Now let's say after shadow element. Here the content is set to an empty string, position is set to absolute, top is set to calc 50% -3 pixel, left is set to 50%, width is set to 25%, and the height is set to 6 pixels. This property position and style a horizontal line before the clock. Background is set to dark grey color. Border radius is set to 3 pixel. And the animation is set to animate 48-second linear infinite. And the transform origin is set to left, so that it rotates from the left side. Now let's style the center element. Here the display is set to block, position is set to absolute, top and left is set to 50%, transform is set to translate -50%, width and height is set to 10 pixel, background is set to light purple color, border radius is set to 50% so that it adds a rounded corner of the center element, and Z index is set to 1 so that it appears above other element in the clock. Now let's style the list item. Here we set the list style to none, position is set to absolute. Now let's style the num. Position is set to absolute, width and height is set to 100%, padding is set to 5% so that it ensures that the numbers are properly centered within their respective list item, and text align is set to center. Now let's style the span element. Display is set to block, color is set to light purple color, font size is set to 38 pixel, and here we added text shadow. So that it creates a shadow effect to enhance their visibility. Now let's set nth child. Here we target the first list item with the class num. We set the transform to rotate 30 degree. And add a span element inside the first list item. Here we set the transform to rotate -30 degree. Next we have a second list item. Here we set the transform to rotate 60 degree and target the span element inside the second list item. Here we set the transform to rotate -60°. Next we have a third list item. Here we set the transform to rotate 90°. Now let's target the span element inside the third list item. We set the transform to rotate -90°. Now let's set fourth list item. We set the transform to rotate 120°. Now let's target the span element inside the fourth list item. Here we set the transform to rotate -120°. Next we have fifth list item. Here we set the transform to rotate 150°. Now let's target the span element inside the fifth list item. Here we set the transform to rotate -150°. Next we have sixth list item. Here we set the transform to rotate 180°. Now let's target the span element inside the sixth list item. Here we set the transform to rotate -180°. Now let's target the seventh list item. Here we set the transform to rotate 210°. Now let's set span element inside the seventh list item. Here we set the transform to rotate -210°. Next we have 8th list item. Here we set the transform to rotate 240°. And let's set a span element. Here we set the -240°. Next we have our 9th list item. Here we set the transform to rotate 270°. Now let's just add a span element. Here we set the transform to rotate -270°. Next we have a 10th list item. Here we set the transform to rotate 300°. Now let's target the span element inside the 10th list item. Here we set the transform to rotate -300°. Next we have our 11th list item. Here we set the transform to rotate 330°. And let's target the span element inside the 11th list item. Here we set the transform to rotate -330°. And the last, we have our 12th list item. Here we set the transform to rotate 360°. Now let's set a span element inside the 12th list item. Here we set the transform to rotate -360°. Now let's set keyframe. Here the 0% and 100% define the start and the end state of the animation. Here we set the 0% to transform rotate minus 90 degree and the 100% is set to transform rotate 270 degree. So that it counter clockwise left to the 9 o'clock. So that's it for today's video. If you found this tutorial helpful, make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more web development tutorials.